When I tell people that I'm autistic, oh, by the way, I'm autistic, I usually get one of two reactions. The first is what I call polite surprise, in the sense of, I wouldn't have expected that. That's very interesting. The other kind is basically denial, in the sense of, you mean you have high-functioning Asperger's, or my personal favorite, but you seem so normal. Very few people see it coming. Why is that? It's because autism is more than a medical term. It has a cultural connotation and a narrative built around it. A narrative that we're going to deconstruct. So what is the traditional autism narrative? Well, you start with a white, middle-class, heterosexual couple. They're about to have their child, then... Yeah. If I had to describe the narrative in one word, it would be tragedy. Autism is the destroyer, the thief in the night, the thing that's scary and bad. There's the idea that autism is completely crippling, except, of course, for that Asperger's thing. But that can't possibly be real autism. From New Yorker writer Shapin just last year, it's a searing experience to have a child whose eyes are not windows to their souls, but black mirrors. There's the insinuation that we're not full human beings, often implicitly, sometimes explicitly. From the late Autism Speaks co-founder, Suzanne Wright, in 2013, if 3 million children in America one day went missing, what would we as a country do? These families are not living. So, according to her, I'm not even a real person. I'm just the shadow of what could have been. There's the idea, in addition, of autism as a recent phenomenon, with official US estimates rising every few years, from 1 in 166 in 2006, to 1 in 88 in 2012, to 1 in 45 in 2015. All of this feeds the notion of autism as usurpation, as something that invaded a normal society, that invaded a normal child. It culminates in the belief that the only possible hope is to somehow find a cure for autism or make us normal. By the way, do you ever notice who's telling the story? Because it's almost always the parents, as either the protagonists or the victims, with maybe some psychologists for context. It's always the parents. The story is never about us. So as you might have guessed, I have problems with this narrative. The traditional autism narrative is deeply flawed, very harmful, even outright dangerous. Every autistic person is capable of living a content and worthwhile life. Not just the ones you get into Tufts, not just the ones you can pass for normal, every autistic person. I want to talk about Fritz V. Fritz was a young boy growing up in the early 40s, profiled in the 1944 paper, Autistic Psychopathy in Childhood, written by one Dr. Hans Asperger. Now, Dr. Asperger lived in Vienna in the shadow of the Third Reich. The Nazis are targeting the disabled, and he is terrified that his patients are going to be next. What do? Well, you're not going to convince the Nazis to stop by appealing to their humanity, but you might be able to convince them that these subhumans are actually superhumans. And that's exactly what he did. He begins by describing his patients, however, with brutal honesty, observing stereotypic movements and habits that he, Fritz, would lash out with anything he could get a hold of, never got on with other children, and Asperger himself wondered if he might never be able to love anyone. Pretty nasty stuff, right? Makes what comes next all the more powerful. From a section called The Social Value of the Autistic Psychopath, autistic people have their place in the organism of the social community. They fulfill their role well, perhaps better than anyone else could. He's clearly pandering, but Asperger didn't pull any punches. The good and the bad are intimately connected. We don't know for sure if there was a concerted effort against him, but Asperger's patients were safe regardless. Asperger's work first is referenced in English in 1981. From there, his name becomes synonymous with a milder form of autism. Now, that's not at all what Asperger was describing, but you can see his positive philosophy being reinterpreted. Asperger's syndrome is then added to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual's 4th edition in 1994, And that's when you really see autism rates start to skyrocket. Now, those rates can really sound like a crisis if you don't know the context. But we've already seen that the rise in rates is correlated with a growing understanding of the autism spectrum's nuance. Also, that autism can be a spectrum. Which brings me to South Korea. In 2011, forgoing the normal looking through of official records, a Yale-led team went to the city of Goyang and personally tested, get this, over 55,000 children. Whereas other studies reported rates of about 1 in 150, they had a rate of 1 in 38. But the real pièce de résistance, 2/3 of those kids were previously undiagnosed. Awareness and understanding are the real factors driving up prevalence rates. Autistic people have, do, and will continue to exist, whether or not you diagnose or notice us. Before we continue, I need to talk about language. You may have noticed that I've been referring to autistic people as just that, with identity first. Medical professionals, on the other hand, refer to us as person with autism, person first, because in their view, it affirms that we are people over our diagnoses. But autism is an identity. It's part of my identity. It's part of my genetics, my epigenetics, my neurological structure built from my life experiences since the day I was born. Is that not who I am? When you say person with autism, you're saying there's a person, and then there's some autism. You talk about it like it's a disease. You talk about it like they can and should be separated. For comparison, think of the phrase, person with gay. It's not very flattering, is it? So you can imagine how I feel, how we feel, when organizations call for a cure. A cure to what exactly? No, seriously, what are you trying to cure? Autism is genetic, so are you going to try to alter the DNA of every cell in my body? Well, that's not feasible. Earlier, what about the non-genetic factors? Are you really going to be taking such drastic action based on a middling assumption? Or are you going to try to eliminate all the outward signs of autism? All the hand flapping, the avoidance of eye contact, the obsession with unusual topics? Yeah, all of this is an ethical atrocity. You're saying that people like me should not exist. Our society prides itself on the individual. We fear being forced to conform. But that's exactly what many want to force onto autistics. We don't want that. We don't want to be altered for the pleasure of society with no thought given to our own well-being or respect for our differences. We aren't perfect. I know that better than most. But that doesn't excuse trying to cure us of our core identities to match how you think a person ought to think and act in various situations. This is an excerpt from the essay Don't Mourn for Us by Jim Sinclair in 1993. It's considered the start of the neurodiversity movement. When parents say, "I wish my child did not have autism," what they're really saying is, "I wish the autistic child I have did not exist, and I had a different, non-autistic child instead." This is what we hear when you mourn over our existence. This is what we hear when you pray for a cure. This is what we know when you tell us of your fondest hopes and dreams for us, that one day we will cease to be, and strangers you can love will move in behind our faces. A common argument against this: "Oh, but you're obviously so high-functioning. We don't want to cure you. I know it's hard to understand, but we were talking about other people with autism who really suffer from it." To refute, one, we've seen earlier with Dr. Asperger why that dichotomy is a false one. Asperger's patients were incredibly gifted, and they had seemingly crippling difficulties. Second, these people act as if they know my entire life story, often from mere minutes of contact, if that. Third, they say I'm oh so functional, but they also say I lack empathy for their side, a classic autism stereotype. So do they really mean what they say? Do they really think of me as anything close to an equal? No. This leads me to the reflection of the cure mentality, which I like to call the Newton fallacy. Now, Isaac Newton is one of those great geniuses who is often thought to have been autistic. In the traditional autism mindset, you're either the poor, sad, doom and gloom autism, or you have this titanic revolutionary potential that you better live up to. This is also wrong because you don't have to be when you're autistic, you don't have to be a super genius in order to be accepted by society. You don't have to earn your right to exist. Indeed, that's one of Jefferson's self-evident truths. It took me a long time to understand this, but I don't have to be perfect in everything I do in order to be a worthwhile person. I was a junior in high school when I found out I was autistic. Emotionally and socially, I wasn't doing well that year. I started questioning whether I belonged, well, anywhere. I didn't feel like a real person. But then I found out, and you know what? It was liberating. For the first time in my life, I understood myself. I could be aware of and mitigate my weaknesses while simultaneously strengthening and building off of my strengths. A little redundant there, but to me, finding out wasn't a tragedy. It was an affirmation of my humanity. In the years that followed, I learned a lot. I learned that we aren't alone, that we're a community. I learned about the difference, or lack thereof, between autism and Asperger syndrome. I replaced I have autism with I am autistic. I started taking pride in who I am. Most importantly, I started speaking up for those not yet able to do so, like I am now, and like I hope you will too, should the need present itself. Thank you.